Good morning. This is Sweetie Berry with Between Us Girls. I'm with the Women of Dare Whimsy, a community for gifted and creative women, and today we're discussing how to release tension, how to release stress, how to let go of pressure. Pressure comes in many forms. There's self-directed pressure where we're afraid we're not enough and we're trying to do things in a way that prove that we're making the best choice. There's pressures of work and others outside of us, deadlines and things that people expect of us that may create unhealth in our life. There's also the pressure of simply trying to do something you don't know how to do. So today we're going to be talking about how to release pressure, and the Women of Dare Whimsy are with us to discuss how they, as gifted and creative women, handle pressure in their life. The very first part of this question is one that I think, as a former gifted educator and current gifted educator, people have a lot of difficulty in the classroom with kids self-creating. All right, Dr. Edith, can you share with us about some of the ways that you see pressure in your practice?
Well, lots of people look at expectations, and the expectations come from their internal self, like you were saying, for perfectionism, but the expectations also come from what they've integrated from society, from family, from their bosses, from their colleagues, and from their children. So they take on all these responsibilities as shoulds, and they try to decide, what should I do today? What should I do? I should be doing this. I should be doing that. So again, the pressures build up because they think they should do everything and be everything to everyone. And rather than making conscious choices about how to be of service to themselves first so they can give to others, and then as well as then what fits into my values at the moment, because I do have a choice to say no. So shoulds, if you're using the word should, that's a pressure you need to look at and make a conscious choice on.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I deal with clients as a strategist for small businesses, authors, and speakers is that people have not identified who they are intentionally yet. They want to be pleasers, and pleasing is in the South something we see rampant, that people want to agree with whatever the person in front of them is asking them to be or do. And they've not really had a strong sense of self, of who they are and how they operate. Brenda Burchard always talks about you've got to first identify who you are before you can identify what you do. And of course, saying yes is a pleasing thing, but we often need the pressure release of saying no first. I encourage in my client work that the first answer is always no. And the no is because you need time to consider, to check your calendar, and to align whether what someone's requesting is truly in alignment with who you are and who you're trying to be. So often, something sounds good, but good is not great. And to be our greatest self, we've got to narrow down to what we do best, to what we can engage with most fully with the gifts and talents we have. And when we do that, we release a tremendous amount of pressure that is in our life already, just simply by narrowing down how much we engage in. I think it's very important to realize what pressure looks like, too. Pressure looks like sometimes impatience. It looks like restlessness during the day, or kind of a panic feeling. Pressure feels like maybe a stomach ache for some people. Pressure feels like not enoughness. A lot of times when I'm dealing with students in the classroom, particularly in the junior high and high school, I start seeing this acceleration to get things done. They're trying to get to the end of something. They are taking what might have been a very enjoyable process and they're valuing the product. And that's because of the pressure they feel to get it all done or to get too much done. And often things like calendars, things like having a list of what's going on to remind yourself of how much there is there helps identify where that pressure is happening and sometimes where it's self-driven. Bobby, talk to me about the pressures that you see and how do you deal with pressures? I know you've been a very self-pressured person through college as a single mom and had a business and was looking at the school, and you've had to identify some pressures and how to release them.
I have really had to, the calendaring has been what's been the best for me because I do write, and I do teach classes, and I am in classes, and I teach in kids ministry. I really have to schedule my time, because if I don't, then I feel like I have to do everything all at one time, and I realize that putting that kind of pressure on me is not only not healthy for my body physically, but it's not healthy for me mentally. And so when I can take those pressures and I can divide them down, okay, between this time and this time I'm going to work on kids ministry, between this time and this time I'm going to write, between this time and this time I'm going to work on my classes, then that really takes the pressure off of me for getting everything done all at once.
I think that's important to chunk time, and that's one of the things I like to do is to talk about a chunk of time I'm going to do something in, because it makes me understand that if I agree to something else, I've got to release one of those chunks of time that was already planned and scheduled, because there is no more time to add to my day. There's only an evaluation of what can I exchange the time for, and time is our most expensive, most precious commodity in our life. And so if we're trading our life for it, we better have an understanding that's in alignment with who we are as an identity and what's the most or the greatest goal for that part of our living. You know, so much of life is about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, or something that happened in the past. But today's experience is where we've got to relieve. And one of the questions I continually push is, how am I feeling? What does this feel like? Does it feel encouraging, exciting? Does it feel productive? Does it feel scary? What does it feel like? Because my feelings shouldn't feel like pressure and tension all the time. They shouldn't feel like a deadline is approaching. That's a clue that the pressures need to be addressed. We all have times where we need to surge. We all have times and deadlines in our life that something comes up unexpectedly through poor planning or through really strong planning, that things just turned around differently. A flight was canceled or something. But we have to stop and identify and ask questions. And questions are one of the most powerful ways to deal with pressure, because so often the thing that was causing pressure wasn't the thing at all, but it may be our perception of that thing and its value. You know, who cares on a lot of the things if you really stop to think about it? Sarah, who is very strong with helping with family financial sense, and one of the things they deal with, I know, is the pressure of money and making money, and she is also a direct sales trainer and a facilitator of a strong and large team that has won multiple cars, as well as an author and a mom. So I know she knows the process of pressure. A lot of rope.
I missed your question. It cut out. So can you repeat the question again?
Would you share with us how you pressure?
So how I deal with pressure depends on what it is that is causing me pressure. One of the ways when it comes to finance was to really schedule things to be automatic. Rather than having to see the checkbook all the time, I chose to implement systems that would allow me to not have to deal with that on a daily basis, but instead to schedule the payments in advance, and that allowed me to not have to always be looking at, do we have enough, is there enough, or, you know, can I pay this bill instead of that bill? And that process of scheduling in advance and putting systems in place so that I didn't have to always look at the numbers allowed me to calm down and allow me to know that all the bills were going to be paid, and I didn't have to worry about late fees because I always scheduled everything in advance, actually the month in advance. And that took a while to do that, for us to develop, you know, cash reserves to have that money in advance. But setting systems in place is helpful. I, like Bobby, do a lot of calendaring, which is very, very helpful. I also do time chunking to make sure I'm doing certain things at certain times of the day, but also at certain times of the month. I do Finance Friday at our house. I do Shop It Saturday at our house, so that there's certain topics or certain focuses for our life goals as well as my professional goals that happen during the week and during the month. And so that because I know everything's going to get done at its specific time, it allows me to let go of the pressure, like Bobby talked about, of having everything being done at once, because that is overwhelming.
That's it. So also you're able to put things like an identified time pressure, and by time it is time choices. Ashley, about the pressure, you handled it.
That's a really good question.
I'm getting feedback. Are you?
It is. Just
I like what Edith regard to expectations. I think that's a really big factor in creating the pressure in life. So, because at the moment my life is very sporadic at times and the energy is spread very thin, it's important to take a look at some of the perceived expectations and just breathe and find a way to laugh about it, find the sense of humor in it all, and to, in my mind, create a space where it becomes a very small condition, situation, and then I can better grasp it through, as Bobby and Sarah are doing, calendaring or chunking down time and breathing through it and seeing if it's really something I need to handle or not.
Well, that's it too. So often it's about when do we handle the pressure. For me, so many times in projects, a lot of the work that I do is direct timed invented. In other words, it's got a live event attached to it. And so when someone hits a red button and says this isn't going well, they are live on television or they are live on a hangout like this. And so I can't put it off for 30 minutes. It's got to happen right then, and whatever I'm doing has to stop right then in order to help support the technical side of what's happening. And our life is much like that too. If, say, emails are a stress for you, people requesting things that are out of turn or out of order for your business or for your life, it may be that you need to adjust when you check emails. That reduces the pressure by not allowing that information to be valuable or costly to you when it's not an appropriate time to deal with it. One of my clients just recently came back from the Bahamas, and one of the things that she had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way, was that we had suggested that all of her office email always be kept on an office account so that when she was on a personal journey, she could turn that off. And she didn't see the value in that for about a year. So during this vacation, even though she was on vacation, not wanting to think about the office, not wanting to open an email, the temptation was too high. And so every day of her vacation had a different crisis connected to it that she perceived as a crisis. And it really ruined a very long-awaited 6-day trip. We need to learn to turn off concern. There's very little that comes in on email that's going to matter tremendously the next week. Think about all of the emails that you get. They may be unhappy if they don't get an instantaneous answer. And by the way, are you training people for instantaneous answers? Are you choosing to answer every text that comes in on Facebook, every text that comes in on your phone? Are you training people to expect immediacy from you on things that are not immediate needs? Wow, that is a real lesson to learn. I recently went through that for the last 3 months, that I looked at how many additions to my day were happening because I wasn't handling the stress of requests, or the requests were coming in inappropriately. There was a time in my career when I spent a whole day a week giving away services, and I would help with whoever that would be. So that was, 6 hours of every week I would do it. And as my business grew, that was an unrealistic number. Now I have just an hour and a half or so a week, and that still adds up to 6 hours a month of unpaid time that I'm adding stress to my life by solving someone else's stress. And that's what I do for a living, so I have to be very careful, because people who have received help for free then later get offended when you say, gosh, that took more than the 45 minutes we allow for that time. And, it's a bad teaching. And sometimes we're teaching people to create stress in our lives by not holding boundaries early on, whether it's time management or whether it's responsibility. So many times in our home environments with children and spouses and friends and cousins, maybe like a family gathering, we teach people to mistreat us if we're not careful. When there are 20 people come into your house, your guest is giving them the house to meet at, not doing everything by yourself. Now, I'm so thankful in the Women of Dare Whimsy who came recently to my home in Arkansas. Everybody took part. Everybody helped clean. Everybody helped do the dishes. Everybody helped cook. There were times we treated them and did things for them, but in general, that gathering was the treat. But everyone did their part to make it easy on me as the host. When we're talking about ways to keep your life healthy and not to let stress and not to let tension come up, we each need to take an active role in what we eat, what we think about, how we exercise, and Ashley said a very important thing, how we take breaks. Because you need a break from things. And it may be sometimes, if something's creating a tremendous amount of pressure, you may need some conversation with it with somebody else. You may need some time to recognize that, wow, your pressure is much bigger in your mind than it is in the entrepreneur next to your's mind or the adult next to you's mind. It may be that there's a solution set that you've not considered yet. So communicating that pressure sometimes is the first step in either saying that, yeah, that's really there and I need to deal with it, or wow, that's blown up a whole lot and I've made it so much more than it is. Dr. Edith, can you share a little bit about how that works in your world? What do you encourage? Being a counselor and working with missing in action gifted kids, I know that you have a lot of dealings with pressure and how people don't respond well to pressure.
Well, you look at with the clients, we're looking at the fact that how can they create a pause? And so I really try to let them learn how to create a pause, whether they're thinking, whether they're acting, whether they're feeling, whatever's going on to create that pause. And the easiest way to do it is watch your breath. Just take a breath. For one of the things is, it's very common that if we're having an emotional response, we're holding our breath. If we're trying to think too hard to make a decision, we're holding our breath. So we want to be able to watch our breath, take a breath, because we can't think clearly if we aren't allowing other breathing to take place. So teach the pause and then have them find what I call a sweet spot or their moment of flow. And that can be, for those that are ADD, one that's in action. I have a person that's a bicyclist. And so for her, that's when she gets in her flow. So now she plays that video for 30 seconds when she gets really into a chaotic state. So first step is they got to realize what a pause is and then find a sweet spot so that they can bring that, ideally as a video, into their moment and be able to pause so that they can interrupt the pressure and the chaos and make choices that are better at that moment.
But that's such valuable information, because how we breathe, how we feed ourselves, and what we feed ourselves in thoughts and thinking and in oxygen really affect who we are at that given moment. Now, I just went through a period the last 3 weeks of thinking just wasn't working well for me. It just wasn't. I was under pressure. I felt overwhelmed by some things. And none of the normal techniques were working. I was sleeping really well at night, and it didn't seem to be affecting my sleep, so I wasn't looking for depression. But, after 3 weeks of it, I knew to go get checked because there was just something not right. And sometimes if you've been under prolonged stress, if you've been under a prolonged period of absolute stress, we deplete minerals and vitamins in our bodies that can absolutely stop our process of being able to think well. And that's something we need to check on. In my case, it was amino acids. I had stopped eating red meats, which in my brain apparently is very important, because after 3 weeks of not having it, I was having just almost obsessive thoughts. A small problem would just be huge in my mind. And I knew that it was small. I could think intellectually this is small, but it just wouldn't get solved, or I couldn't make a decision. And I'm a decision maker. Anyone who's been around me knows that, bottom line, I make decisions quickly, I execute them, and I take action. And so for me to have that far a difference, I knew something was really wrong. And so it didn't take but about an hour worth of time, and then a couple of days afterwards of understanding and changing the diet to get back to a calmer place and to let go of those pressures. And guess what? Those pressures sometimes completely are in your mind. How we think about things, the value we give things, really matter. But our diet really matters too. So if you're doing a change in diet, if you've done a change in the way you've eaten, are you supporting thinking well and being healthy? Are you relying on too much sugar or too much caffeine? Have you had enough protein? Are you getting enough sleep? Most of us need 8 to 9 hours a night of sleep. Those of us who are hyper like me may have to do it in 2 batches. You may have to do 5 or 6 hours and then later take a nap during the day to get the rest of the sleep you need to stay healthy. But part of that relieving the tension is understanding, what does health look like? And some people, I have to say, gifted and creative girls are really difficult about this, are more into pouring on more of the same. We continue to escalate our organizational skills. We escalate our get-it-done skills. We escalate our ability to do things with different applications until we're really operating at a very tight pace all the time. I see it all the time in high school girls. I deal with a tremendous amount of act-out, call-out behaviors with parents and high school counselors where they want me to come in and work with that gifted child who's just out of control. But when I stop and look at that quote-unquote out-of-control acting out, so often it was coming a long time. It was a long time in getting there. They're on 3 or 4 sports. They're the leaders of 2 or 3 organizations. They're involved in church. They're involved in 2 or 3 outdoor activities outside of school and outside the sports at school. And they have been on a tight wire for a long time. And eventually that wire pops. Their health gives, or their behavior gives, or their grades give. And it has nothing to do with the thing that gave. It has to do with the big picture of the expectation they had for themselves, or in some cases the expectation their parents and school officials had for them because they're a superstar in some area. Relieving pressure, understanding where tensions are. You know, we're just not made to live under pressure all the time. Our body regulates to pull that adrenaline when we need it for crisis. But living in crisis is not where we're intended to be. And our body, our endomorphs, our adrenal glands eventually go through exhaustion if we live in that space. I'd like to popcorn quickly to everyone about what is your best stress relief when you know you've got a lot of pressure on, when you're under a deadline for a book, or when you're in a deadline to get through a soccer season or tournament with a child. What is your number one way to survive the pressures of life? We'll start with Ashley.
Remembering to never give up, no matter what. That's it. Keeping a sense of humor, breathing, and just keep going. Because reminding myself that this is a temporary situation. If I'm in a chaotic or a crisis-driven situation, which is what I seem to be in the most at the moment. So just remembering who I am and that this is really kind of funny in the scope of life, and find the funny in it.
You know, that's so valuable because no matter what our worst day is, we've survived it. And so that means we're going to survive this day too. Most of us have lived on this earth a few years now, so we've been through a few different crises. But in the middle of a crisis, it's so hard to remember this is temporary. You know, one of the things that's very important is to stop and play. It's just so important. It's like today. I'm through, when we're through with this program today, and about 11:30 I can leave this house and go play. I can go to lunch with my daughter. I can enjoy doing some activities with her we've been looking forward to doing. But when you're under pressure, it's very easy to say, oh, I don't need to do that. Oh, that reward really isn't earned. I could spend 3 more hours writing on the book, or I could spend 2 more hours working on a technical issue. Physically leaving the environment opens so much up to your mind, body, and spirit. Today, it's a beautiful day in Alabama. It looks like a fresh spring. It rained last night. Everything is beautiful, lush, colors popping everywhere like Dr. Edith's yard. It's got tulips and everything coming up in our yard. Just walking out the door, even for 5 minutes, would be a fresh air, fresh mindset, fresh space. But to take several hours to do so is so important in our life. And, you know, I told one of my friends who was losing a home, and it was really happening. There was nothing they could do to stop the bankruptcy and to lose their home that they built. But it was going to happen anyway. And so this is the day they had. And that 2 hours wasn't going to save their home, but it was going to save time with their 6-year-old, because that time won't come back. Bobby, what's one of the ways you handle stress, and what do you do to reduce the stress? What's your best go-to?
Probably my best go-to when I'm at home and I get overwhelmed, because a lot of what I do is at home, the writing, the schooling, everything, is I'll take that time, like you're saying, and I'll turn the radio just as loud as I can get it and just dance around the house. Now, this is not something I would ever do in public. My son says it embarrasses him to death, so I'd be real careful not to do that in public. But if I'm in public and I'm finding that I'm under the stress and everything, I do like Dr. Edith said earlier, and I watch my breath. I'll breathe in for a count of 3, breathe out for a count of 3. And that's something I can do in public. And whenever I focus on my breath, then that refocuses everything that I'm doing.
You know, I think that's so important to take time to play with it and to say, gosh, I need this aversion. I need this diversion from what I'm doing. You know, one of the things that I encourage people to do is also to really identify what it is that you're feeling under pressure for. You know, sometimes we just kind of get a generalized pressure and we haven't identified what it is, or we think it's the house is a mess, or we think it's the money is not right for our business, or we think that it's, you know, a deadline for a book that we're writing. But if we write it down, we have solution sets in our mind to solve that. That can be fixed. And sometimes there are not solution sets, things that are beyond our control. But just writing it down again then affirms, you know what, I'm going to trust a higher power to take care of this, and I'm going to focus on what I can do and take action. I find that actions and giving is a way for me to change the pressure in my own head. If I take action on something, I can't do that, but I can do this. That gives me forward movement, and before long, many of the pressures are gone because forward movement happened, and I wasn't giving too much value to what I was thinking. Dr. Edith.
You know, for me, I have to, so much of my stuff is cognitive, so that for me to go do something physical, whether it's like you said, go for a walk, but even doing dishes, something that simple, that seems mundane, or picking something up, it changes my whole thing. Another thing I do is I crochet, so to sit down again and have a repetitive process just to clear my mind. But back to some of the things we've been talking about too is look at the big picture, put everything back in perspective of the big picture, and put things back in perspective of what I value, what's important to me. So those are things I use.
Absolutely. I agree with all of them. Thank you for sharing. Sarah.
Okay, well, I absolutely love the dance party. I was going to steal that one from Bobby, because not steal it, that's what I was going to share, so I won't share that one. And we do a lot of breathing at our house, but the other thing that helps me manage stress is a clean space. I really value clean spaces, and when you have 3 children and lots of things happening, there's not always a clean space in the house because people are going to and from. And so one of my favorite tricks is a big basket. I have a big laundry wicker basket, and if I need my office to be clean really fast because I need to work on a project, I'll just dump everything in the basket. It's a temporary fix, I promise. It doesn't stay in the basket, but it gives me a clean space to be able to function and have clarity and calm down the chaos that is surrounding me in my environment. And I'll do the same thing in the kitchen. I have a big plastic tub, and if the dishes are stressing me out and the counters are crazy, I put everything in that huge plastic tub and I put it in the garage. And then when we decide to actually clean the kitchen, then it all gets put away into the dishwasher and everything else. But sometimes you just need a really fast fix, and that's my fast fix to bring me clarity and focus when it's something that's causing me too much stress.
Gosh, I'm right there with you. My number one place to go is to get that. If I can get that, life is a lot better quickly. I do work from home. I have an office in another town, but my offices here have a lot of people in and out of it, as well as virtually in and out of it. And so getting that space around me clean, not even clean, but it's clear, gives me space to think. But I also have really gotten into Post-it notes. I really love stickies and spirals, one of the classes Sarah teaches, and one of the things she teaches is to use those Post-it notes. But I use them differently in my visual right now. I know what I want to be in my life. I want to be peaceful. I want to be joyful. I want to be a giving person and facilitative of people's change and people's growth. And so I remind myself of that greatest self, of who I am when I'm being my best self. And I don't mean best as in perfect or the highest self, but I mean in the person I'm most comfortable being. If I'm most comfortable being a stylish, organized, facilitative person, then I've got to do the actions that support where I'm most comfortable. And that means making your bed, and that means putting on clothes. You know, I don't have to put on clothes any day of the week unless I'm filming in Nashville. I could put on pajamas all day long. I don't have to put on my makeup. I don't have to do that because I work from an environment that doesn't require it. I don't do it for someone else. I do that for me because that helps me be my best self for me, which allows me to be at peace and calm and being able to breathe to go forward. We're at the end of our Between Us Girls, conversations between gifted and creative women from the Women of Dare Whimsy. Each week on Thursday, we launch a blog called Between Us Girls at darewhimsy.com, where each of our moderators have come in and shared their best tips, their best tricks for how they deal with pressure in their life. We know that as you read the 5 or 6 that are there each week, you'll resonate with someone, and you can follow them home to their blog or to other posts they've written within Dare Whimsy. We hope that you'll leave comments and that you will let us follow you home to your website, to your blog, to the place you are on Facebook, so we can get to know you too as a gifted and creative woman. Dare Whimsy is a community where we learn to release, restore, and relax into our gifts, and we hope that you'll join us there each week. We have about 3 posts a week that are live. There's always the Between Us Girls show, and we're starting new shows this summer. We've so enjoyed you being here today. Thanks for coming.